Back in the early 2000s, I was a store manager at a Starbucks shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And there was a regular customer I had who came in every morning. His name was Tom Ehrenfeld. And I didn't know this at the time, but he was actually the editor for the Lean Enterprise Institute, which does a lot of things, but one of the things that's a pillar of their business is book publishing. And so he was the in-house editor for their book publishing business. So every morning he came in, he refused to say venti. He ordered a jumbo dark roast. And so he'd come in and get his jumbo dark roast, would have a few minutes of conversation at a time. But over years, it evolved into a relationship, as it does with all customers at Starbucks. And one day, I actually have a copy of it here because it's one of the Service Physics sacred texts. But he brought me a copy of this book before it hit the shelves and said, "This is a book that you need to read."
Steve, thank you for joining. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I'd like to introduce you with the glowing praise you deserve. So Steve Crowley, my guest here, he is the co-founder of Service Physics, which is an organization dedicated to bringing lean principles to service work. His mission is to improve the lives of over 1 million people who work in service jobs through better design work. I've known Steve for years, way back since we were at Starbucks together. We reconnected shortly after him and his partner, Brian, created Service Physics. And I'm a huge supporter of his work. I'm a huge fan of Steve as an individual, as a father, as a business leader. I'm really excited to have him join me today. So, hey, Steve, how you been?
Good, Gary. Thanks for having me on your inaugural podcast episode.
Yeah, this will be interesting. And I really couldn't have thought of somebody better, man. I can't tell you how many times I share the story of when you called me out on I don't disagree with you. It probably comes up weekly. So here's the story, people. I'm working with Steve and Brian. And Steve made a comment, and I believe I said, "I don't disagree with you." And Steve stopped me cold and he said, "Yeah, but do you agree with me?" And it was one of those moments where a lifelong bad habit, I had to confront what that really meant. And it just gives an example of what Steve has brought in my life. He's brought the kind of intellectual challenge that I crave, that I don't usually get with people, because Steve has got that unique blend of a lot going on behind the scenes with a way of hitting you with just simple questions or statements that are really profound. So, Steve, I love that. I love being able to call that out. And when people use it on me, I don't disagree with you. Remind me, do you remember what we were debating at the time?
I don't remember, except that we were debating strategy, which really wasn't going to benefit from being on the fence any longer. We needed to go one way or the other.
That's right. You got to choose. So that's probably a great way to start. What I'd like to do is ask you a few things that you would have told Steve Crowley of say 6 or 7 years ago when you were thinking of going into business yourself. All right. So I'd like to have this conversation be around, what you've learned, what you would have told yourself, and honestly, what you might share with somebody who's checking out this podcast, who's either just starting their own business or considering it. Right? I'd love them to learn from your life lessons. So why don't you give me just a quick story on how you found lean to begin with?
Oh man, it's not a quick story.
No, it's not, but that's okay.
But I'll give you the quickest version. Back in the early 2000s, I was a store manager at a Starbucks shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And there was a regular customer I had who came in every morning. His name was Tom Ehrenfeld. And I didn't know this at the time, but he was actually the editor for the Lean Enterprise Institute, which does a lot of things, but one of the things that's a pillar of their business is book publishing. And so he was the in-house editor for their book publishing business. So every morning he came in. He refused to say venti. He ordered a jumbo dark roast, and so he'd come in and get his jumbo dark roast. Would have a few minutes of conversation at a time, but over years it evolved into a relationship, as it does with all customers at Starbucks. And one day, I actually have a copy of it here because it's one of the Service Physics sacred texts. But he brought me a copy of this book before it hit the shelves and said, "This is a book that you need to read." I've just finished the editing process. It's going to market. It's called Managing to Learn by John Shook. It is the book on A3 thinking. Story for another day about what that is, but that was my introduction to Lean, was receiving that book. Fast forward 6 months later, John Shook, the author of that book, had a contract with a senior executive at Starbucks to serve him as a coach as Starbucks went on its learning journey. And so my regional director at the time had been given a copy of that same book. And when I saw it, I said, "Hey, I read that book." And we had a conversation about it, and that sort of the serendipitous moment of Lean coming at me from two directions, from the customer side externally and from the leadership side internally at Starbucks in the earliest days of Lean thinking at Starbucks. Fast forward to a few years later, I had a position or an opportunity to take the position of leading the Lean Innovation Lab in the corporate headquarters. That's where Gary and I met, as he was the leader of operations engineering and innovation. We were using that lab for a lot of testing. That's where I honed some of the practice. Later moved into lean management systems and really beginning to appreciate the social side to the technical side. Fast forward almost a decade later, now that's what Service Physics does, with the mission of making service work better for people. So that was my intro to Lean. I'm just now in the stage of my career paying that forward. I listened to a podcast last week that said most people's career journeys follow this path. You go from mercenary to missionary to craftsman. And I think I'm in the missionary phase of life. I've done the mercenary work, and now it's the mission moment.
I love that. Yeah, well, mastery is going to take, a lifetime, right?
Yep.
Subject as complex as Lean. Was the executive at the time, was that Scott Hayden?
It was.
Because it was Scott Hayden. So I remember that. I remember when I heard about Scott Hayden, this operator down at Global Ops who was looking into Lean, and as a guy in industrial engineering at the time, I thought that was interesting. But it's so fascinating. So this is exactly as you would have drawn it up in a playbook, right? You would have assumed that your future calling in life would have been one of your regular Starbucks customers who came in and would eventually give you a book, right?
Who knew?
That is so random. What about Lean first lit you up? When you read that book or when you started learning about it, what was the thing that really attracted to you?
It's a good question. I think my baseline was perpetual dissatisfaction. And so I think I had spent my entire life looking for something better. And I grew up in the restaurant industry, so it really doesn't get any worse operationally.
Right.
And so when suddenly someone was presenting something that felt like an answer, and having it be so counterculture. I mean, a lot of Lean principles are exactly the opposite of what we have been genetically and culturally programmed to believe. I think just as humans, we want to surround ourselves with more inventory, more labor, more space, just these things to, just in case. And operating from a space of precision and having just what we need just in time is nerve-wracking. And so I kind of found comfort in the uncomfortability, knowing that the general practice of operations in the restaurant industry and service industry wasn't working anyway. This offered a new path.
So the perpetual dissatisfaction, which I love that term of just it is difficult. The service industry is difficult. Restaurants particularly difficult. There's a lot of challenges, but then couple that with the contrarian nature. Like you must have a contrarian nature, right? You are seeking something outside of conventional wisdom, right? And so here was something completely different or opposite of what everyone else was saying, and that attracted you, right? Now,
And scared me half to death. And I'll
and scared you.
tell a little personal story. So
Yeah.
when I left field operations at Starbucks, I did so by taking my what they call a career coffee break, which is a sabbatical you can take
Oh
after
yeah.
10 years of service. You can take a year off. And I went back to school, got a 1 year MBA, knew that I wasn't interested in going back to the field. Almost didn't go back to Starbucks at all. I entertained the idea of opening a seasonal malt shop in Des Moines, Iowa. Um, Turned out I was too young to live in Des Moines, Iowa at that point, which is funny because now I live in Des Moines, Iowa. But when I took the position that I did in the support center on this like lean innovation team, my wife was still back in Tennessee where I had been going to school, and she had her house on the market and was trying to sell it. And I can remember talking to her every night and saying like, don't move too quickly on selling the house. I'm really not sure I'm going to make it. Because I was experiencing a complete reprogramming of everything I had learned in the decade plus prior in this industry. And it was unsettling. I felt constantly behind. And, at the time I didn't have kids, and with my wife not around, I used every waking moment to read and study and listen to whatever I could get my hands on to sort of like level up my knowledge, because there is a lot to know. Now, as it turns out, the thesis behind service physics as a practice is based on the fact that there actually is so much to know and so much to get excited about that and that's one of the reasons that many organizations never succeed in their lean transformation, because they try to do everything. And so the the thinking behind service physics initially was like, what is the minimum effective dose of lean thinking that operators could apply and start to get some traction and wins? And maybe they need the entire lexicon at some point in their journey, but they certainly don't need it to start. And so thinking about applying lean problem by problem instead of like, we weren't lean and now we're going to be lean and then here's
Okay.
everything, and it just becomes too heavy.
Okay. So it's the start that stops. It's such a vast body of knowledge. And it's so all encompassing in terms of almost like a philosophy, if you will, that it can be overwhelming. And what you found is this minimum effective dose. So for people who are not completely familiar, lean is the same as Toyota manufacturing system?
I
Are
think
they the same, or did lean grow from it, or vice versa?
I have some insider baseball
Okay.
from the Lean Enterprise Institute,
Okay.
which is there was I'm not they just updated their website, so I'm not sure it is still this way, but there was a section of the website to answer the question, what is lean? And it was the most heavily trafficked part of their website for a very long time. So
Okay. So there, that tells you something.
this debate remains, inside of the community. What is the difference between lean, Kaizen, lean engineering, and good engineering? Isn't lean engineering just good engineering? There's like all of these topics. What, TPS versus lean? Is it a thinking practice? Is it technical? Is it social? Is it coaching? Like, what is it? It's just problem solving. Like, I think when I boil everything lean down to like the cellular level, it's applying good practice, problem solving, and then the other parts of the practice that come in are situational. But the only one that's pervasive across all, whether you're problem solving for people and calling it coaching, or are you doing a specific process improvement activity and you need value stream mapping? That all kind of boils down to lean problem solving.
Okay, so you've gone all the way to the point where you would explain lean as just problem solving methodology, but I think a lot of people, if you know a little bit about lean, like I do, I would go like Muda, Murray, and what's the difference, or types of waste, right, or visual signals. So like I know lean's got a lot of individual tools that really belong in the lean catalog, if you will. But you're saying you don't even view it that way anymore. You view it as just problem solving.
Well, it starts with problem solving, right? So
Starts with problem solving.
it's
Okay.
all well and good to know the seven wastes, um, but aimed at what problem? You could go and start removing waste with no problem to solve, and it's not a good practice. Um,
Okay.
so usually when I'm, starting with somebody who's brand new to lean, I'll start with let's define problem as a gap, and let's practice the art of writing a problem statement that articulates a gap that we can either see or measure. And once we've done that, start to think about ways in which we might approach closing that gap. A very early thing might be let's go and see, which is a lean concept, going
Go
to
and see.
see. And when we get there, let's differentiate between work and waste. Work creates value for customers, waste does not. Maybe we get to defining the seven wastes, but maybe we don't even need to. Maybe it's like clearly just motion is the problem to solve here. And we can actually close that gap by eliminating motion, opening up capacity to do more work. At that point, I would say like lesson one for today is done. You got the minimum effective dose, and you can actually go be really dangerous with motion kaizen for a decade probably. Um,
Right.
or maybe it was something else. Maybe motion wasn't the problem at all, and it was an inventory problem. Now let's talk about a pull system or visual signals or something like that. And this is sort of the danger is like it's all very exciting, and we can go learn it all, and then we can go try to do it all, but it's not aimed at a very specific problem. And then we either don't get an opportunity to practice because it has nothing to hook onto, or it just became overwhelming or an expensive initiative for the organization. Or what we see most often is it's quote unquote just taking too long for this transformation to happen. And that's like, well, yeah, for what transformation to happen? What were we trying to do in the first place?
Right. You're maybe someone's trying to boil the ocean. That reminds me of it's if you learn a new skill, it's like you now have a new tool and you go looking for problems for that tool to solve, right? As opposed to starting at the problem. Like, what is the problem? To your just a solid problem statement, definition statement. That's half the battle, right? So you're not wasting time chasing something where, yeah, you could put 100 man hours in and you've improved things 1/4%, or you could spend one day and take 50% of wasted motion out,
That's it.
right? So what are you trying to solve? Okay, so lean appealed to you by its contrarian nature. It appealed to you because you're in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, and obviously, as I promised the audience, you're a thinker. You tend to intellectualize these things. Maybe if somebody was hoping to learn a little bit more about lean, why don't you do me a favor and remind me, what are the 7 forms of waste? Because I have a particular question about one of them that I'm gonna hit you with. So what are the 7 forms of waste of lean?
Yeah.
Because people have heard that.
So I'll list them off, and I'll use the Tim Wood acronym so that I
Okay.
can not say like. And there's one more I can't remember. So the T stands for transportation.
Transportation.
Transportation is stuff moving around.
Okay.
Not to be confused with motion, which I'll get to in a minute. Motion is people and machines moving unnecessarily, but transportation is like information or material. I've also heard it called like your money on a ride. So
Your money on a, so this might be injection molding a part in Mexico, shipping across the border to pad print it and put a barcode on it, and then shipping it back to Mexico to put in a final assembly to then ship back to the States to put in the box. This would be like a lot of transportation.
Yeah, or I've got a real life Starbucks situation for you. Starbucks
Yeah.
roasting facilities are in the United States, and all the quality control. So they'll buy coffee in Brazil or Mexico or Colombia, ship it to the US for quality control, roast it, and then ship it back to those countries to sell. And you can imagine the quality problems that come from that, but also
Okay.
transportation cost.
So that's transportation waste. You said motion.
Yeah.
Is that next in
Uh,
the?
and
No.
Tim, what
Let's
would
stay
be
in
I?
your
So yeah, I inventory. So
I is inventory.
too much or too little parts, information, stuff. Too much or too little stuff.
Okay.
M is motion, so unnecessary movement of people and machines. Usually, if you're not an industrial engineer, you're concerned with the people and not so much the machines, but a lot of lean effort on the operations side is getting the machines are usually fixed cycles. And so you're organizing the humans to work in like a ballet with those machines to keep the machines cycling more often. One thing we often hear restaurant operators and service industry operators asking for is more and bigger equipment. And
Right.
we have data from thousands of restaurants now, and we've yet to find one restaurant that needed more or bigger equipment. It's just getting the equipment they have to cycle more quickly.
So is this the big thing that airlines are talking about? It's turn that plane around so it's in the air more often than on the ground.
That's it. Or think about your last experience in a Top Golf, like getting those bays. Like they don't make money with an empty bay or a dirty bay that's not turned, but you get guests into and out of that bay as often as possible to keep that thing making money.
Right. Right. So you don't necessarily add 50 more bays. You take the bays you have and keep them earning revenue as much as possible. Okay,
Yeah,
so that makes sense.
we did a design project for Top Golf in Chengdu, China. It was the biggest one they were ever going to build, and we've inside the station itself is all the cleaning equipment. So as one party is exiting, the cleaning crew comes in. They don't have to bring anything to that station. They flip open a thing, and out comes everything you need to clean the station and put back. And so just a few minutes it takes for the new party to come in, you can turn over the station. And you think about all the bays they have across all the Top Golfs, and suddenly that adds up to an astronomical figure.
Now, is this going way back to your restaurant days, right? At some point, somebody in fast food or fast casual invented the concepts of let's have our patrons, our guests, clean up after themselves, right?
Yep.
They take the tray, they throw their own garbage away, they bust their own table, right? So now all we have to do is go and wipe it down. All right, so we got that transportation, inventory, motion,
Yep. W is for waiting.
waiting.
Waiting is things that get stuck, and things get stuck all the time. So orders get stuck, people get stuck, things just stop moving. I worked with a coach more than a decade ago who built his entire coaching practice on getting people to look for things that stop moving. He would just say, "What's stuck here?" And as soon as something stopped moving, you can identify, well, that's a problem. Why did it stop moving? A really good example of this is if you look at any fast casual restaurant that has the follow your food model. So Chipotle, Cava,
Oh,
Sweet Green, watch the bowls get passed. And like 80% of the time between when the bowl first gets touched and it gets to the point of sale to get rung through, it's just sitting there. It's dead. It's not doing anything because it's moving between people who can't do anything to it. So there's an alternative to that, which is cells. And the reason, like in manufacturing, nobody builds things on assembly lines like that anymore. Everything's assembly cells that things, move from cell to cell. And that's to stop that stagnation. So things can just continue to move through the cell because it's one person doing the thing and then moving it on, not passing this part to somebody who may not be ready for it.
interesting. Okay, so that's waiting.
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
four.
the first O is over processing.
Over processing.
Or you could just call it processing, unnecessary processing. It's doing things that don't add value. Usually, when people experience the waste of waiting in a restaurant because they've had pounded into them like time to lean is time to clean, they start over processing when they experience waiting. So it's like, hey, I'm waiting. I'm starting to feel some anxiety. I'm going to do something. I'm going to clean a clean counter, go wipe off a clean door. Or at Starbucks, when they used to use Sharpies, it seems like start clicking Sharpies or moving stuff on the counter. It's just processing waste. Or if you hit reply all to an email, only where one person needed to read that, but the other 99 people are subjected to it, they're over processing.
That's a great example. That's a form of waste. Is I've just taken some mind share of this person for 10 or 15 seconds that I didn't need to. So
Yeah.
I wasted. Oh, I'm going to hold that statement because I wasted my time. So, all right. So that's processing or over processing.
Yeah.
So we're getting there.
And the cause of that overprocessing is the second O, which is overproduction.
Overproduction.
Toyota calls this the primary waste. Some companies call it the mother of all waste because it tends to hide and cause the other six wastes. So overproduction is producing anything in excess of what the customer needs. So if I hit reply all on that email, I've overproduced for 99 people when the one person actually got value from it. In restaurants, anything that we describe as a batch is overproduction, and some of it's incidental, right? It's like it's the best we can do today is make a batch of this chocolate sauce to put in a cafe mocha or a batch of chicken wings because we don't have the processing ability to make one chicken wing at a time, and that's okay. The goal is to get as close to one at a time, just in time as possible, knowing that it's gonna take us some innovation and a roadmap to get there.
Now, is this the concept of single piece flow? Is this where
Yeah,
this comes in?
single piece flow is the goal.
It's the goal.
So
All right.
one thing at a time, just in time.
But we're not taking one kernel of corn through the entire process to get a bowl of corn, right? That's
Right.
where there's this limit to batch versus single piece flow. But generally speaking, overproduction is when maybe somebody misunderstands setup cost and thinks, well, I've set it up, so I might as well cook 100 burgers right now. Then they're all cooked,
Yeah.
right? Because you might overshoot and you don't sell through them all, or the quality goes down, or so that's
And
what overprocessing does.
yeah, we often overproduce when we're trying to limit mental complexity as well. So it's mentally complex to let's think through like a Mexican restaurant. It's
Okay.
mentally complex to stop and fry up a batch of tortilla chips. And
Right.
you might know that tortilla chips are good for 6 hours after you fry them up. So every 6 hours, I'm just going to fry off as many as I can, and then they're going to sit. But I can guarantee you that those tortilla chips are going to be way better in the first hour than they are in the sixth hour. And so they're just going to kind of degrade over time.
And
And
probably the last batch of the day has a lot of material waste in it, right?
exactly.
Yep. Okay.
And so while it might not be possible to fry every batch of ordered chips to order, which would be the goal, can we get closer to 1 hour than 6 hours? And so
Okay.
that would be the problem to solve. We would set a goal and we would define that as the gap and say the problem is that tortilla chips are best within the first 3 hours and we currently hold them for six. Let's close that 3 hour gap. And now we
Okay.
can go after it. Um,
So that's overproduction.
Overproduction, that leaves us with defects.
Defects.
Some companies call this rework, but often in the restaurant industry, we don't get an opportunity to rework a defect. So we just call it defect. It goes out the door and it ends up in a Google review or worse, customer just doesn't come back. And so we have that problem that got passed on to the customer. So I think that was it.
All right.
So
So
yeah,
when we talk about problem solving and you say just getting somebody to write a really good problem statement, if you were to bring someone into your team and teach them the foundational principles of what you do with service physics, do you use that? Do you teach them these 7 things and then say go and find what form of waste we're seeing? Is that, do you always try and define it? Is this a transportation waste? Is this an overproduction waste? Or do you not even do that? You just kind of write the problem statement and then it becomes apparent what form of waste there is.
so we do, and the reason we do is because, and maybe this is the nerd in me, but I don't know if you've seen the Harry Potter movies, where like Harry Potter is the only person that will say Voldemort's name, and everybody else refers to him as like he who shall not be named.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like there's real power in naming something. You take the power away from the waste by naming it, and then you can do something about it. And the activity that we do in training our clients, our partners to identify waste is we show the classic I Love Lucy video where Lucy and
The
Inez are
chocolate
working in the
factory?
chocolate factory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
because that's just overproduction. The chocolates are coming faster than they can handle, and so you see all the other waste start to crop up, like the defects that they're
The
hiding down
deep.
their shirt or eating. There's so much motion. There's tons of processing. They're all there. And so we usually have the 7 wastes up with the video playing next to it, and just like go through, like tick them off when you see them, and then we kind of have a reflection after, and it's fun. Um, but it's real.
So thank you for that. And by the way, I don't want to make the whole episode geeking out about lean because it's near and dear to me. I've always there are things about look identifying waste, right, and always asking the question like what can we do better, right? Everything can be done better. You can't let perfection be the enemy of the good, but there's almost always a way to improve a process, right? Problem solve. But there is one, I want to ask you this one thing because this is controversial and I'm still struggling with it even since you told years ago. You can't waste time. Time is so help me understand that. I think most people would think time is a waste because you've heard the phrase that's a waste of my time. We wasted time on this. Why is that not one of the wastes?
Here's why I'll die on this sword, and I've been in many
Okay.
LinkedIn debates with engineers around the world who love to get on this, get in this battle with me. There are 3 words that in English we talk about wasting all the time: time, wasting time; wasting money; and space, wasting space. These are costs. Some of
These are
them opportunity
costs.
costs. And it's important not to define our problem as a cost problem. Because when we just go on a cost cutting adventure, we've ignored the process that helps us reduce costs. But costs are not causes, they come from causes. If you can find the
They're
waste,
symptoms.
you can find the waste, you can find the cause, you can do something about it. And it prevents you, if you're going to cut fat. Don't cut muscle. Don't cut bone. Let's go in and like I can reduce costs, I can reduce time, and I can reduce the use of space by lowering batch sizes, standardizing work, removing motion, and these kind of things. And so I think it's really important to me in the problem definition space to be really clear about these are costs, these are wastes. Let's go after the wastes. The cost will improve, the quality will go up, the time will go down, and the cost will go down.
So give me an example of when somebody went in with the focus. Maybe even a client told you, reduce this cost, right? I want you to start from the cost side, not from, the problem side, the root, but the cost side. Like, how did you work through that?
Well, I can talk generally about something we call the labor death spiral.
Okay. Labor death spiral.
And so labor is, especially in the restaurant industry, an emotional topic because it is one of the biggest visible costs on the profit and loss statement. But labor is essential, particularly during peak periods, to managing throughput and quality. And in the hospitality business, it's a part of the product. The people are a part of the product. When you reduce labor costs, particularly again during peak periods, what you end up with on the other side of that is a labor scheduling tool that is reporting something bad that you did. So you spent less labor, but you also were not able to drive the revenue, which made your labor look worse at the end of the week. So the next week you cut again, and then revenue goes down. And then so you cut again. This is why we call it like the death spiral. Once you start cutting labor, you start to find yourself in a pretty precarious situation. Now, contrast that with trying to remove motion from somebody's work during a peak period, keeping them from producing ahead of the curve during a peak period so that they're ready for the next peak or shoulder period where the demand just isn't going to come. And now suddenly they have capacity. Now, the thing we love about capacity is you get to make real business decisions based on that capacity. Now I have the capacity. What can I do with it? I can serve more customers. That's probably the best thing to do, because now I can bring in more revenue to cover the fixed costs of the business. I could reinvest that time in training, which always looks bad on the P&L when you have to bring in incremental labor to train people. That's going to pay off sometime in the future. But if I'm just using capacity, it doesn't even show up as a line item on the P&L. Or maybe I need to take that money to the bank and save it for later. And that's a real business problem to solve too. But either way, I'm doing that with capacity instead of cutting into another part of the business.
That makes sense. Yeah. All right. So I want to shift gears a little. All right. And I wanted to just talk about lean again. It's been a while since we had that discussion, but you're an entrepreneur now. You went out, you struck out on your own with Brian Reese, and you've created this lean consultancy. You're in now, what, your fifth year?
Yep.
Fifth year. So you've reached a certain milestone a lot of startup businesses don't reach. So congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Looking back, what's one thing you wish you knew now, or then, that you know now? Like, what stands out? Like, if I had known this when I first started, it'd have been easier. We would have grew faster. We would have had less heartache. What have you?
It's hard to pick just one.
Isn't it? Yeah. All right, give me the top three.
Yeah, I'll share the first one, which I feel like I'm in the middle of, because I wish I had known it earlier. I'm still in it, learning it, and the more I learn, the more I realize that I need to be better. And so you probably heard the phrase before, and that's true with many of these things. Like you hear them in other phases of your life, and you register them as like a truism. But until you really experience it, and then you're like, oh, like youth is wasted on the young. You probably heard that a million times when you were young, right? And you're like, yeah, I get it.
Meaningless to me as an 18-year-old.
And then you get older, and you're like, oh, they're right. So you probably heard the phrase like clear is kind, or clarity is kindness.
Clarity is kindness. I love that one.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, and it goes back to lean, because when you are not clear, waste results. And so I think early on, we, as leaders of the company, processed a lot of things out loud, which is confusing to those around us, and can sometimes sound like direction or sometimes muddy the water. But actually, we were just like contemplating things. And then even if we're not totally clear ourselves, give like partial direction or unclear direction about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And it was about a little over a year ago, that we had a lean coach, a TPS coach, audit one of our meetings. And afterwards came to us and said, what percentage of that meeting do you think was value creating versus waste?
Oh.
And we knew as soon as she said it, and that was kind of like lesson number one. And she would coach us through like setting targets on a weekly basis, and she'd have us like articulate it, and we'd have like a paragraph of like what we were trying to accomplish for the week. And then she'd get us down to a sentence, and then she'd say like, make the sentence half the length. And she'd say like, can you draw a picture of it? And like, can you get so clear that somebody could just see like a graphic of what you expect, and that it could, and sometimes we would get there and sometimes we wouldn't, but the practice was really good for us just to think through how, with like razor sharp clarity, people will exceed our expectations, because people are awesome, right? And especially like our team, like we scoured the universe of awesome people and found the awesomest unicorns that we could find. But even unicorns without clear direction are not going to be able to do what the expectation was, because it wasn't clear. And so that's something that again kind of like just hits me every day. Like when something goes off the rails, I'm like, what weren't we clear enough about? Where did we make a mistake in our communication?
So now that speaks to me, that speaks to one of the reasons I really admire you, is that how many leaders are going to watch their team struggle and ask themselves what they did to cause that, right? Most humans, we're finger pointers, right? What didn't you understand? Why didn't you ask for clarity? Why didn't you check with me first, right? It's always them, right? You stop for a minute and go, how did I set that in motion? And what can I do better? So in your own personal life, so that's an interesting lesson as a leader. In your personal life, what would you say you adopted too late from what you knew as a lean practitioner into your own personal habits, like your work or personal habits? Like, we all do it, right? The cobbler's kids have no shoes, right? Yeah. We all suffer from this. What would you say was your biggest, like, man, I didn't do my own lean thinking on my own stuff?
This might be better if I start with, like, if I hadn't given you the clarity lesson, like, what's another lesson?
Okay.
The learning kind of came from a combination of, like, trial and error, that same coach I just mentioned, and then I think working through EOS with you around when you are new to running your own business or starting something from scratch, you mimic. You kind of like live action role play your way to what you're supposed to be doing because you don't know any better. It's not, nobody gave you a blueprint and said, this business runs this way, do this.
Right.
And so you start to, you use your experience, and then also you look across the landscape and be like, what are other people doing? You start doing those things. And I think it was after a couple of years, I started, like, I'd have these moments, and this is really embarrassing to share in public, but why not? Where I'd be like on my way to a meeting, which I have a home office, so literally like up the stairs from breakfast to my office, be thinking about work and a problem, and I'd be like, you know what, if this was my company, I would do this differently. And I'd be like, oh, this is my company. And these are actually things that we can do. We need not be on somebody else's playbook or do the conventional wisdom thing. This is our business, and we can do that. And so to bring that back to your initial question of, like, what are some of the things that I learned that I can apply to my personal life? It's like, don't live action role play your life. Right? And so, like, don't mimic what other people, like the people down the street, do this thing and have this thing and do this other, and then you kind of just like go through the motions. It's like, I can remember my father's 36th birthday. We had a birthday cake for him, and we sang, and he blew out the candles, and then he got this funny look on his face, and he just took his hand, he put it in the middle of the cake and picked up a big piece and then took a bite and put it back down. And we're all just kind of like terrified, like, what the heck just happened? He said, I always wanted to do that. And now I've done it. And so I take that as like inspiration to just like break outside of the thing that we think we should be doing, or is the conventional wisdom, and just do what needs, solve the problem, solve the
problem.
Yep.
So I know one of the things, again, I don't want to sound like a fanboy, but I am a fanboy of yours, Steve. One of the things I admired about you and Brian is your willingness to go out and get advice, have mentors, have thought leaders. So you talked about bringing in a lean consultant to look at yourselves, growing a lean consultancy, right, to point out things. What bit of advice did you get early on that maybe helped you survive that first year or two, right? If you were to pass it on to somebody considering starting their own company, what's some really good advice that you received?
That's tough. So our first year involved COVID.
Oh, that's right.
So it was a really interesting time. But I think one of the temptations that we resisted with some counsel that I'm glad is that we never took investment. And so somebody had, and we, Brian and I had been working at ZX Ventures, which is the innovation arm of Anheuser-Busch InBev. Mm-hmm. And everything, those businesses we were building were all trying to get to the next round of investment to keep going.
Right.
And that is fine, but I don't know if I would celebrate the need to borrow more money unless it was like the only way to fuel the growth or getting to the next stage. And our business it's as asset light as you can get. It's 95% human driven. It's a service business. And so we were able to kind of like resist that temptation, buckle down and just bootstrap it. And now fast forward 5.5 years later, we've got nobody that can tell us what to do. So, back to the like, it's our business. We can do what we want. Like, it's really our business because we don't even have, shareholders or investors that are looking for anything in particular. We are beholden to our client and our people first. And I feel like as long as we can maintain that focus, it's a winning recipe.
So, congratulations, by the way. It's the harder way to do it, bootstrapping your way. It takes a lot of grit. So congratulations again, 5+ years, dude. So that's awesome. You've obviously, you're a business owner. You talked about accidentally causing confusion instead of clarity. You're now growing you're growing a leadership group, I'd imagine, right? At some point, you want to tell me if I'm wrong, but you and Brian want to get to a point where your organization has some leaders that can continue to drive it and grow, right? That's part of scaling. What's a bit of advice? There are some people that are very good technically that don't make good people leaders, and there's some people that are natural people leaders that really can't handle the technical. What have you learned that you could share with others? Any kind of tips or advice on how to spot the right talent in your organization to start promoting into leadership positions? Like what are the tells that you look for? Is it like, unending intellectual curiosity? Is it humility? Like, what are those kind of signals that you've picked up that you're like, it seems like the people that we really trust in leadership positions share these common denominator, if you will?
We have 6 core values, and I won't bring you all the way through them, but it's a little bit of cheating because one of our core values has like 5 sub core values. But it's the concept of servant leadership, which is based on a book by Jim Autry called The Servant Leader. And what he roughs out is 5 ways of being that make a leader a servant leader, which I think is really important in our industry, a service business serving service businesses. And so we need our leaders to be of service, not of command leadership. And so the 5 ways of being, the acronym is AVAPU, which is not a very sexy acronym, but it helps, like Tim Wood, it helps me keep things organized in my head. But be accepting, that's the A. Be vulnerable, be authentic, be present, and be useful. And so
be useful.
those 5 things are like a complete description of somebody who pulls people along instead of pushes them towards the front. So again, accepting, vulnerable, authentic, present, useful.
So this core, that is the core. If you see servant leadership in somebody, then it is more, where are they in their career? What are their aspirations? But if somebody wants it, they say, hey, I should be in charge of this department. If they don't have those characteristics, if they're not servant leaders, you've learned probably not going to work out in our company.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say that's generally speaking, I mean, is that really different if you're not in a service environment or a hospitality environment? I mean, I've heard servant leadership a lot. I mean, wouldn't you think that's more of a universal thing to look for?
Yeah, it could be. I don't have the experience to tell you if it is or isn't.
That's fair.
But I've certainly seen it. I've certainly seen leaders in many companies, Fortune 500 companies, small startups who don't exhibit these principles. And you can be in a leadership position but struggle to be a leader. And
Yes,
I think that becomes the disconnect.
that's so true. The title and the function don't go hand in hand,
Yeah.
right? What's next for you?
It's the $1 million question. I think we are like the 6 foot tall 11-year-old that everybody thinks should be able to play basketball, but is like really, uncoordinated. I was talking to one of our former clients last week at the National Restaurant Association, um, and I was describing like we're only 5 years old, but we're playing with the biggest players in the restaurant industry and healthcare industry. That is creating a problem for us because the projects are huge and our team is small. And so we
Mm,
always end up with like these, if this project starts, we're going to be understaffed. If this project doesn't start, we're going to be overstaffed. And
right.
we're still small enough where like margins are not that forgiving. And so I think what's next for us is to continuing to grow into our body,
Okay.
so that we become the 6 foot 16-year-old that's actually good at basketball and doesn't have to just like revert to the guitar or something. Um, and so, I think we're impatient. Back to the perpetually dissatisfied thing. We're always pushing, pushing, pushing. But also, I think there's something about time and maturity and just growing into the body that we've been dealt. Um, and we'll do that in the same way that we got to where we are. It's plan, do, check, act. Everything we do internally has an accompanying experiment plan. We make mistakes all the time. We fail all the time, but small mistakes, small failures that don't upend everything. That's actually another thing that we learned from the early days was we tended to swing the pendulum one way and then the other way, and then the team would come with us, and it just felt like that. And we're trying to become much more stable, and run small experiments. And what's the old adage, like fail often, fail cheap, fail fast.
Yeah, felt cheap, right? Well, I think having the introspection, well, there are a lot of companies that they get enticed by that home run, right? That whale, and you can grow yourself out of business because your mistakes are multiplied then at that level, right?
Yep.
And so staying within yourself and allowing that maturity and growth to happen. Again, I think it comes as well with being bootstrapped. You would have that pressure from investors to really push on you to do that. And so, that move's paying off, I think, on this front for you as well, right? You can go at the pace that makes sense to you, that gives you balance, and also you feel good about what you're doing in the work. You're not over promising and under delivering, right?
That's right.
So I love that.